Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the CoinGeek Weekly live stream. I am your host, Mr. Kurt Wuckert Jr. Thank you for joining me live, just like you do every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be bringing in old friend and now frequent guest, Siggi Óskarsson, in about 5 minutes. So if you are a Teranode fan or just like Vikings, you're going to want to like, subscribe, hit the alert bell, and stay very, very alert to the episode here. We're going to be talking about the progress made on the Teranode project over the last few months. And Siggi was on sometime in the last 6 months to give an update. So this is our new update, and you need to be ready to observe and retain and keep rocking and rolling, everybody. So if you are watching live, please let social media know that we are live, and we'll be taking live questions from the troll box, but you do have to put them either, I think you can comment under my X post or the CoinGeek X post, or it's actually easier if you do it on YouTube because there's a whole conversation that happens there on the regular. Any questions, comments, blessings, cursings, scrapes, gripes, or gropes, please put them there. We will answer them in the order of, not chronological, but in order of their importance, based on the opinion of Alex Vidal, who is the producer of today's show. We are produced entirely live from South Florida via wherever the heck StreamYard is based, but they do a heck of a good job. So thank you to all my friends, my Floridians, and the world for tuning in. And actually, thank you to CoinGeek, who has been so kind. We have had a really, really good time working with the rebranding team. I don't know if you've noticed that at the periphery here, the logo's a little different. The color treatments are different, and yet I still look mostly the same. So if you'd like to be a sponsor of the show, we would love to have you. If your brand content looks a little bit better against this slightly modified blue palette, you should also reach out to Alex Vidal or reach out to the CoinGeek account on X, or reach out anywhere you feel like reaching out to CoinGeek, frankly, and we will get you hooked up as a sponsor for the show. On that note, today's sponsor is Rock Wallet. So thank you, Rock Wallet, the easiest place in the universe to swap your Bitcoin for BTC. Wink, 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 and and some of the other stuff that exists out there in the cryptoverse. So I said it. I'm sorry, but no, actually. So if you want to swap your coins, so it has BSV, BTC, Ethereum. Couple of Ethereum stable coins. I think the incoming money stable coin, that's MNEE, is hashtag coming soon, but we are pretty excited about that. It will be a native stable coin across several blockchains, including the BSV blockchain, and we're excited to see where that goes. I also want to give a shout out to the Champions TCG team for continuing to sponsor the CoinGeek Weekly live stream. If you would like to participate in that, you simply have to have the comment of the day. If you have the most insightful or the most humorous comment, you will win a full deck of cards on Champions TCG. You can reach out to the CoinGeek account on X to redeem, but you need a hand cash wallet. If you have not received a redemption, please go ahead and you can reach out to the account, let Alex Vidal know. He can answer you and get you all filled up. Feeling all warm inside. So thank you, Champions TCG and Rock Wallet. We are going to cut to Siggi in a couple minutes, but I want to remind you, I'm working on a new series over at CoinGeek. I published my articles on Tuesday at 9 a.m. This week is the first part of a series called Hodling Breaks Bitcoin, where I'll be talking about the economic model of Bitcoin. I'm thinking about why people don't understand that a cash system is meant to be used for payments. And so I'm going to go into the various design decisions that exist in Bitcoin that sort of imply it, and in some cases heavily imply that the network is supposed to be used. You have to have velocity. Money has to have velocity. All of your BTC people that like to pretend they are Austrian economics but don't think money is supposed to have velocity, I would question their... Actually, I would question whether they have actually read Mises or any of the other Austrian economists in the first place. Store value is great. It is one of the properties of money, but it also must have velocity in order to have liquidity, in order to be useful in all kinds of other ways. And that was a fundamental design decision. I keep screwing that line up. And I'm going to explain a few of those reasons why. The first one that we did today was about privacy. So the privacy model of Bitcoin breaks down completely if you do not use your coins in commerce. I explain all the reasons why. I explain some of the variations, like why BTC has done what they've done and why BSV is doing things the way we're doing, and why if anybody's to succeed, we need to actually spend some coins. So check it out. It's my pinned post on X. I am going to flex my vocal cords. I'm going to whet my whistle. We're going to play a little ad, and then we will be right back with Siggi Óskarsson. Hey.
Hello. How are you doing?
Live on the. I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good too.
Good.
Nice to be in the show again.
Yeah, no, it's really good to have you back. It's been not too long. I think you were on sometime in the last 6 months talking about
6 months ago. Yeah, I think so.
The updates of yesterday, and now we're at the updates of today. So maybe can we let's give a little recap on the last 6 months roughly. So going from super alpha to what they're calling beta, and I know because you're a really, really both humble and talented developer that you probably are uncomfortable calling it beta. You probably want it to be like alpha plus plus or something like that because you're careful. But
alpha minus
alpha minus, yeah, whatever it's supposed to be. But what have the last 6 months looked like? Has the team shifted around? Like what are the goals? Maybe what things have you learned going through the last few stages? Let's kick us off, and then we'll get into some more details.
So it was 6 months ago. That will be about March. So that's actually before we did the big tests. And so we were at that time when we were wrapping up doing what we call the proof of concept, a million transactions a second test, and a lot of that was just infrastructure work. So it's just figuring out how to configure the network properly, the disks properly, what sizing of the machines, etc., etc. So probably ironing out the last bugs, but we try to forget about that as soon as possible. And then we did the test. We did in end of April, we did a million transactions a second test with 3 nodes. And then we kind of switched it around, and we were going to run that for a long time, but we changed that and said, you know what, we've been doing this for 2 weeks now. It's actually going fine, and it's going to go on forever if we just give it the storage, etc. it needs. So let's up the ante a bit, and let's do a 6-node test. So that's what we did, and that was running during the London blockchain conference, and we did a successful 1 million transactions a second test on 6 nodes, all talking to each other, sharing information, doing all that stuff. And well, I have to say it was a proof of concept, right? So it doesn't do everything that a node should do, but it was actually doing all the work: transaction validation, block validation, it does all that. And I think we proved for us without a doubt that this is possible, right? 1 million transactions a second on a UTXO-based blockchain like Bitcoin is possible. And after that, we went in a different mode. I took a couple of weeks off, went to Iceland, sat in a cabin, not in the woods because there are no woods in Iceland. So it was on the top of a hill with a overview of volcanoes.
I was going to say, you probably had to check in on your volcano.
I literally was watching the volcano that blew up in 2010 and disrupted all. I had a view of that from that cabin, so that Amazing. Was great. And after that, well, the team, of course, continued during that month of June. But we've been basically wrapping up the rest of the feature set that are needed for a full node and fixing a lot of bugs and issues. And now we are actually listening on mainnet. So we have 3 nodes now. So we just fired up a 3rd one today, and we've 3 nodes that are listening on mainnet, and that is the first step. So we're listening to we're doing a block download just to exercise the system to make sure everything is actually working properly. And one of the nodes is actually caught up and is listening to transactions live and validating blocks. A really interesting thing, though, that we have, we have very close connections to the people that run the seed nodes on the BSV network. And we opened 2 terminals next to each other just to see how the current SV node is comparing to the Teranode. And it was interesting to see that they were actually identical. So a new block comes in, it's validated, bam, it's added immediately. It's the same. So it was a lot of fun to see. So yeah, it's a little bit of making a long story short. The last couple of months have been a little bit painful because we solved the problem before May, and now we just have to, fill in the blank. So the 80-20 rule, we're now in the 20% task that takes 80% of the time and it's 99% of the pain. So that's where we are now.
For sure. No, that's definitely the hard part. I remember talking to you 6 months ago, and it was like, yeah, so we figured this and this and this. And I remember you were down to like 2 or 3 microservices that just kind of, you hadn't really dove into. And, and I imagine now we're roughly there. It's fascinating. We're looking at network stats, like live mainnet stats. And, I get my critics as an operator of a pool. I get the people who are like, hey, congratulations, Kurt, that last block had 3 transactions in it, that kind of thing. So, which is like, hey, well, yeah, that's some days this network is unpopular, and that's reality. But what are your thoughts on like some of the decisions that could have been made across like, hey, should we use MongoDB over here versus, whatever the competitors are on various things, or like Aerospike has competitors, for example. And like, there's lots of decisions that could be made in those kind of things, like just different sorting algorithms and like all kinds of stuff like that. I'm wondering whose job was it somebody's job to do the like outside research, or was this something that like you just kind of took on as it came, or like how do you make those decisions? Because I think if you take all the possible variables for things that you could have used, there could have been a million different iterations of Teranode as it exists today. So I'm curious about that process, if you could let me know.
So what I'm trying to do in the Teranode team is create a very collaborative atmosphere where everybody, feels free to speak up and say things. And so it's been a team effort. A lot of the people that are actually on the team, they don't want to be in front of the camera. So I'm the I'm the one that has to do it. But these decisions have been team efforts. So I have the title of architect of Teranode somewhere in my portfolio as well. But it's a collaborative effort, and and actually when we started the project out, we already started looking at these things, and a lot of work has already been done. So for instance, the NOC, the Network Operations Center that is run from the BSVA, was developed by nChain. They did a lot of research in there as well. So we took that on, and that's actually where Aerospike comes from. That we're using Aerospike for the UTXO store. We did do other tests. We did do some tests with Redis, and I don't think we've done tests with Mongo, but I have a lot of experience with that, so I kind of knew what that was. But we needed quick results, and we needed this to work, right? So Aerospike was just up to the task. And when you get to these levels, like 1 million transactions a second, and let me just correct something else, because there's a lot of misunderstandings about this on X, for instance, and other places. We're not doing 3 million transactions a second. We're doing 3 million database operations a second and 1 million Bitcoin transactions a second. That's the difference. The 3 million number comes from database operations that Aerospike is doing. So we have to do some lookups. We do some things like that. That's deletes. There are all kinds of things that are happening, but that's the case. But when you get to that level, things really start to matter. And something like Aerospike, basically the speed that Aerospike gives you is the speed of the disk drives that you have in your server, which is absolutely mind-blowing. So that thing can ingest data at the speed of your disks. The faster disk will go faster, and there's nothing else that does that. And at this scale, costs are important. And this was the most cost-effective solution. But we have in every aspect where we have a need for a storage solution or a database solution, we have created interfaces in Teranode. So there will be possibilities to use other things as well. So we, for instance, the blockchain service runs on Postgres. But you could we run that on SQLite, for instance, in some of our development environments, but you could swap that out for MySQL, Oracle, it's all pluggable. So it's a very pluggable architecture that we created. So,
that's a great answer. And the concept of modularity is increasingly popular as stuff gets built out. There used to be 20 years ago, everything was super proprietary, and you had to pick a whole stack, and you were stuck over there. And now even companies like Facebook just kind of open source their a big chunk of their tool set anyways, because it's just like, I don't know, let's just make the internet as juicy as we can. So
but they do always open source the stuff that they used 5 years ago. So the stuff that they used today is the stuff that they open source. So it's good, and you can use it for a lot of stuff. But if you want like the bleeding edge, then you'll have to pay for it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah. So actually, speaking of which, what is there a strategy, or has it been discussed? That kind of concept. I've heard a few people say like, "Oh, it's awesome! It's going to be open source. Like Teranode's going to be great." Like, but what stops? I saw somebody mention like Bell's coin here in the chat. Like, what stops other Bitcoin forks and stuff from just being like, "Oh, that's cool. Like, we have Teranode. Litecoin runs on Teranode now." And granted, it would need some retooling because of SegWit and Taproot and a bunch of the other stuff going on that is different. But to some decent engineers, it's not really that much work. So I'm curious, is that something that do we care about that? Do you care about that? Is that a good thing? Like what's your gut tell you about how that looks?
I have to be a little bit careful now. I'm an open source fanatic by heart. So I think most things that are not business critical are open source and should be open source. And so something like this at the basis of the network, it should be freely usable, because this is not where we're competing. Where miners compete on hashing, you compete on infrastructure, and when you're validating transactions, when we get to a little bit higher scale. But we should be driving adoption, and adoption comes from applications. It doesn't come from these things. It's the same thing like MongoDB has blown up because it's open source. You can buy licenses for it, SLAs, and you can buy services, and that's actually what a lot of people do. They buy that service from MongoDB. They're not called MongoDB. I forgot what they're called. These are the Atlas, I think it's called, the service they have. Yeah. And that's fine as well. So there is this open source model where you can still make money by giving SLAs and services to people. But these discussions are still taking place inside the organization, because this is a bit of a fear. So there's been a lot of investment into this, huge investment into the software development, and an even bigger investment into the test just to prove that this works. I mean, the AWS costs were quite high. So somebody needs to pay for that. And if that is taken by somebody else, and so that's the thing that we're talking about. I don't have an answer for you yet. I think making this open source and creating a network for everybody that scales and everybody can join, I think that is probably the best in the long term. But short term, that might have bad consequences. Although I think, like you said, the retooling, there's a lot of things that are very different. And we haven't looked at how hard it would be to do something for something like Litecoin or anything like that, but I imagine it's fairly easy, actually.
Yeah, it's not that different. I mean, there's a lot of different. I mean, it's been 7 years or whatever since we've sort of taken different paths, but they're ultimately, a lot of the fundamentals are still the same. It's literally just swapping out some signature validation mechanisms and a few things. It may even be especially easy because it's a modular setup that you can just kind of pull one Lego out and replace it with the Lego that you need. And so it's interesting.
There's another aspect though to this that I think it's something that a rabbit hole that we could go down to look at as a community as well, because a couple of weeks ago I was talking to some people at the BSV, Connor and Darren. I think they're also very well known in the community, and we were looking at what is SegWit actually. What did they do with SegWit? And it's actually much more insidious than I ever thought, because it's actually not a protocol change. That's the conclusion I'm coming to. It's not a protocol change. It's basically just poking a massive hole into the Bitcoin protocol. Yeah. And so when you've done that to your chain and you've severed the digital signatures, what do you actually have? Even if you take the software that we have and you put that on Litecoin, you put that on BTC. Even if these crazy people actually want to increase the block size, you're looking at a chain that's basically broken. It's a broken chain. So even if they would scale, there's massive legal things and all. It's just a mess. We're not doing this because we're technical purists, but it's because there's more to it, economics, legal issues, and things like that. So it would be really interesting. I'm not smart enough in all those areas to look into it. But it would be really interesting for other people to go down that rabbit hole. What did they actually do with SegWit?
Sure. No, it is. It's actually really fascinating. When I start to explain to people a little, and they're like, "Well, it's a soft fork. It's optional. People can do it." And I'm like, "Yeah, but can you revert it? Can you eliminate SegWit?" And the answer really is a pretty hard no, unless you get like unanimous social agreement that it needs to go. Like you'd essentially have to hard fork it out. And so
no, but this is the thing that I came to, and I think it's my preliminary conclusion that might be completely wrong. So the internet, please correct me if I'm wrong. But the transactions, SegWit transactions are basically, they're just ripped out of the secret, but they were actually ripped out everything. The unlocking and the locking scripts are actually really dumb. It's just, I think it's a public key hash or something. That's all that's left there. So it's nothing there. So it's basically an anyone can spend transaction. If you have the hash of that thing, you can spend. You don't need a transaction. And the signature is somewhere else. So the miners are being enticed to validate these things or not allowing anything through that doesn't. But the protocol itself hasn't been changed. And it's like if you go back and say, legally, I should be able to just spend this with the hash of the public key, screw your signature because they're not in the blocks.
Yeah.
And so it's a very, very weird thing. But I mean, there's a little bit of a tangent. This is a rabbit hole I went down a couple of weeks ago. Very interesting. But I think there's things like that have been talked about over the last couple of years that are down the road and long term might be even more important than the technicalities of the technology they were actually developed.
Well, and and I think that's really important. It's not even just the legal. I think it's the social. Like if you just talk about Litecoin or Doge and bells and whatever, like everybody's been social engineered into this notion that bigger blocks are bad. A network can't handle that. If you want it to actually be widely distributed or decentralized, that you have to be able to run a node on your mom's boyfriend's computer, I think is what I've been saying lately. And like ultimately that's a very philosophical decision at its base. And so you have to get past the sort of social engineering of it in the first place. It's like, talking about it's like Russia and Ukraine. And it's like, to some people, like, they don't really care. They look at it and they're like, I don't know, that border's arbitrary. How old is that border? 50 years? Like, what's that in the grand scheme of things? But if you're one of the people that lives at that border, or, you get drone strikes, you're being invaded and there's Marines shooting at you, it's like, no, there's a really big problem. This really, really, really matters to me. And so you have to see it from both directions. And I'm still of the opinion that even after everything we've shown to like the BTC people, which they've responded with like getting ordinals tokens. Now there's like fractal Bitcoin and some of these things where they're like, oh, cool, higher level computation, like Bitcoin can do all this cool stuff. But if you start saying like, yeah, no, imagine how much cool stuff you could do if you had 100 megabyte block size limit. And then it's like, it's like you brought up, who are the rightful people who live in Jerusalem? It's like, well, let's fight about that forever instead. So, yeah,
I think you're bringing up very sensitive topics, Kurt. We should probably not do that on this call. But
I
put that in perspective,
really as examples, yeah.
Yes, but I think the whole Bitcoin discussion is similar to that. It's that people are dug in and they're not coming out. And but my experience with that is that if you start pulling on those threads, and I think I started doing that in 2015, 16. That's why I kind of got off Bitcoin. But you start pulling out those threads, you just see that their arguments don't make any sense, and they immediately like a lot of other people do. They start calling you names, so you're whatever a shit coiner. I don't know what they were all this idiot stuff that they're using, but they start calling you names, which basically means they don't have any arguments. But if you look at what Satoshi wrote, many years ago, he wrote about this. It ended up in data centers. If you look at the design of Bitcoin, there's so many stuff in there that doesn't make sense if your blocks are only 1 megabyte. You can make it much simpler. The whole design of Bitcoin is far too complex to be so small. It is built for scale. Yep. So it's rationally, when you look at it rationally, you have to come to the conclusion that it's a big blockchain. But unfortunately, not everybody is rational. So,
no, for sure. So in discussing that, I guarantee, because I get the critics. There's like the 4 people that are full-time haters of me and Craig and whatever they perceive as the enemy. But they will bring up they use the signature validation mechanism from SegWit, which I think was a Peter Wella merged thing.
I think Peter Todd or Peter Wella, yeah. I think Peter Todd. I was looking at that the other day, yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was Peter Wella, but I could be wrong. I haven't looked at it in a long time.
You might, yeah. I'm actually not completely sure because I forget these kind of things, these kind of details. But I think Peter Wella, he did write libraries for the signature stuff, so he did a lot of C coding for that.
Yeah.
But the actual SegWit chains, you might be right. It's one of the Peters.
Yeah. Either way, so I know this will get brought up, so I'm going to ask you. I believe it was the portion of the signature validation mechanism, I think, that was taken out of, I think it's used in SV node, but also I think or likely will be used in the Teranode implementation as well. Can you talk about maybe why that software was the right decision to use in such a system, or what are your thoughts on it?
Well, there's 2 aspects to this, right? There's the technical aspect on how do you validate the signatures the fastest, because that's the most expensive thing. So we've just, looking what's the best open source library to do that at the moment. But at the same time, we're actually working on integrating the code from SV node itself. So the C++ code in SV node, putting that into separate libraries so we can actually use that in Teranode and in other projects as well. So we want to open up a lot of this stuff. So the discussions that took place, I think, a long time ago is that we should only have one implementation for Bitcoins because it's dangerous to have multiple implementations. Yep. I always thought that was backwards. I think it's dangerous to only have one implementation.
I agree. That's been one big, and that's a Satoshi line. Satoshi argued that you shouldn't have more than one implementation of Bitcoin, and that's always it's just I wouldn't say that it rubs me the wrong way, but it's always bugged me because I don't understand the logic. Yeah. So.
No, I think it's if you have a bug in your implementation, you might fork off.
Right.
Go fix your bug and you're back on the network. So it will cost you some money. So it's an economic thing. If you have a problem and there's nothing else, the network will be fine. Bitcoin will be fine. And if we have more implementation, it's much harder to attack it as well. But the other thing is actually with the signature validation algorithm, it was introduced in SegWit, and the reason was for malleability. So to prevent malleability of the transaction ID, because ID is used in all kinds of applications, and we got that when we forked to BC8, they took that algorithm with them, and then we've inherited the SV node as well. But with the latest release, we are opening that up a bit. So we're going to keep that signature algorithm with a fork ID in there that actually doesn't allow you to malleate the signature. But there's a lot of applications that can be had if you do allow transaction ID malleability or transaction malleability changing the transaction ID. And so in the next release of the SV node, there are some new features coming that we will have to implement in Teranode as well, including using opcodes in the unlocking script, which is a bit scary but very exciting, and dropping some of the requirements that actually prevent this malleability. But we've decided to, in the BA, so it's basically Connor decided that we'll keep both. So if your application really relies on transaction ID, just keep the fork ID, sign your things like that, you'll be fine. You won't be able to malleate the transaction. And if you want to use some advanced features, opcodes in your unlocking script and things like that, you'll have to take into consideration that your transaction could be malleated somewhere underway. But that's actually also weird. I mean, if you have your transaction, you send it to a miner, who's going to malleate it? Isn't that the miner? It might be. I mean, it's a very small chance of happening, and it's. I think it's one of those things when the guys in our friends on the other side of the Bitcoin wall, they are making everything about technology. And being very technology purists and not looking at the system as a whole, and basically breaking some of the aspects of the systems because this has to be perfect. Yeah.
Well, they spend so much time on edge cases, which is
a
very neurodivergent thing to do, and it has value. This is it. when I worked in cybersecurity, I always used to say this, like, you want your most talented autistic person working on your security, possibly, the penumbra of what could happen in edge cases, but that should never be in the purview of like the operations department, your DevOps people. Like they need to be pushing out code, because those things are in the 0.01% chance of failure. Like, that's, for all intents and purposes, statistically it doesn't matter, right? And so it's weird to keep it there, and I go back and forth. Like, part of me some days feels like, nah, it's clearly malicious. Like, to take something to this extreme and just keep arguing about the extremes, like, that's a malicious tactic to stop us from thinking just openly about Bitcoin. But then I come back the other way and say, no, I think it's just the nature of the people that are there. It's a group of people that just want to bicker about edge cases, because that's what they would do on a Friday night, the same as they would do on a Monday afternoon. So
yeah, but maybe you can look at it the other way. I mean, it's fine that you have these people that are perfectionists and trying to. I mean, and looking at the code that is done in the core team, it's actually quite good. Those guys are good. But having said that, driving something like this from a pure technology perspective is wrong. And if you don't have the people with economic, legal, and operational background, or everything in the room, and you're actually talking about it from a holistic application level, then you're going to get into trouble. I think that's what's happening. It's like you say, it's the autists that are driving the bus, and it's just, that's never good. There's no business that actually runs like that. I don't think a successful business runs like that anywhere. So. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about timelines. We talked about how we got from 6 months ago to here. What does the next 6 months look like? And maybe if you could let me know, what does the 6 months look like if you're in charge of everything versus, whatever else might happen because of economic incentives and other people. Say a big client or something shows up and needs a million transactions a second. Like, now.
Well, I mean, the next 6 months are basically going to be is the 80-20 rule, right? When we're in the 20% that takes 80% of the time, it's going to be a lot of quality work. So we're doing lots of testing. We're really great guys that are doing testing on our side. End-to-end testing. We do integration testing, unit testing. We're doing lots of testing, and we have to iron out all the issues that we find. A lot of the issues that we're having or we're finding are concurrency issues, right? So with microservices, everything's happening asynchronously, and all the things moving. Everything is moving at the same time, so it's hard to find those things. So we're fixing those. But in the next quarter, so Q4, we're going to be hopefully starting mining. We'll have to try to get some hash power, probably first on testnet, and then convince somebody to put their hash power to a Teranode to do that on mainnet. And in the Q1, we're going to be wrapping everything up with the documentation and cleaning up and removing some stupid comments that we left in the code so far and things like that before we release it. So it's planned for end of Q1 next year. And we really have to do that. So if a big client comes and says, I need 1 million transactions a second, we're gonna have to keep them talking for the next 6 months and hopefully not start the project until then. But SV Node will be able to handle a lot more. I mean, we have tested SV Node to, I think, a couple of tens of thousands of transactions a second. You just have to scale it up, and it does scale. So we're probably okay for the next 6 months. After that, we plan on running Teranode next to SV Node for the rest of the year in 2025. So we're not planning on sunsetting SV Node quickly because we want to make sure everything's okay. So we've been doing our best, writing good software, writing tests, doing all this stuff. We're going to do some security testing, pen testing. We're going to do all these things. But I mean, just look, any software that you create, you think you're fine, and then you put it out there, and then you get punched in the face because there's something that you forgot or something that works a little bit differently in real life. So running it at least 9 months next to SV Node. That's the plan for next year.
Interesting. And then from an infrastructure standpoint, let's assume, is it 1 million transactions per second? That's how many orders of magnitude away from the average of the last 2 years? That's 3, 4, 5 orders of magnitude. It's a very big number.
It's a very big number, yes.
But and I'm not great at napkin math when it comes to orders of magnitude. But like, let's assume there's, just this explosion in popularity. Maybe it's like another huge crypto bull market and like, all this stuff. So you get the organic, like, hey, here's a cool blockchain thing, but then you get real customers and you get all this stuff. Like, let's assume that, in the next 6 months, we're, floating at, 100 gigabyte block size averages or something like that. What do you suspect? And actually 100 gigabyte is probably, no, definitely don't do napkin math on the fly, Kurt. But whatever that number is, where we start pushing Teranode limits, what does it look like to try to get to the next million? Because it's like the jump from 1 million TPS to 2 million TPS is probably more than a 2x move on a lot of the moving parts, I'm guessing. Or is it not?
No, actually not. I think we've done some preliminary napkin calculations, so nobody can take any. This is a disclaimer that you shouldn't take this as a guarantee, but there is almost everything in Teranode is horizontally scalable, and it scales very linearly. We've been very pleasantly surprised by that. So if you have more transactions, you just add more validation nodes, more UTXO store and nodes, and it will scale. And we've the biggest, the most important part is the UTXO store, which is now handled by Aerospike, and Aerospike can do a lot more. I mean, they do that already. They have clients running a lot more, so that's not the problem. But there is one part that is actually not sharded yet. So it's just a one, and that's the block assembly. And it's actually very efficient now because it's just purring along. And even at 1 million a second, it wasn't doing a lot. It was using like 10% CPU or something. So it's actually been optimized quite well. But there are some bottlenecks in that one. And my back of the napkin calculations say that we could probably go to about 6 million TPS with the current architecture. Maybe 10 if we factor in some improvements in CPU networking and all that stuff in the next couple of years. But after that, we'd have to take, especially that bit, we'd have to re-architect. And we just haven't figured out how to do that yet. So for 1 million TPS, it wasn't necessary. We could just do with one block assembly machine for 1 million TPS and probably up to 6 or 10. But that is a big headache because of the way that we process things. An order is actually very important. So if we get transactions in and we process them, we need them to be in the correct order when they enter the block assembly, because parent and child relationship have to be correct. So the way that we do things, order is important, and that's difficult across systems. So if somebody has a solution for that, you're welcome to shout out and talk to us. We have looked at various things like graph databases and things like that, because I mean, in the end, a blockchain is basically just a graph, it's a direct acyclical graph, or DAG. But they just create so much overhead that you need a lot more resources to actually run that at these scales. So we're trying to dissect everything to its smallest element. What is a DAG actually doing? And let's just do that instead of using the DAG or a graph database. So you might, up to about 10 million, we might have a linear scalability, and then we might have to do a jump that might be much more expensive because we have to go to a graph database, and therefore, you don't have one node, but you might need 100 nodes to do that, and things like that. We don't know yet, to be honest. We don't know, but that will be, development work that's happening in the next couple of years. Sure. I think we have a couple of years for that, Kurt.
I think so, but it's only, I've been saying for a long time, it's slowly then suddenly. So it's,
yes, that's true. Yeah.
You get those.
I've actually had that a couple of times in my career when you're working on a new version and you have your version ready and it's not actually been tested, and something happens and you just have to go, oh, I have to just turn it on now. Hope for and I don't want to do that again. I've done that a couple of times. It's like, let's not do it this time. Let's do it correct this time.
Oh, here's hoping.
Hoping.
Mr. Vidal, let's start taking some questions from the audience. We got about 20 minutes left here in the show, which is hi heroes. Well, that's what an intro. Are Teranode being architected with some kind of sync with ARC and the design team? At the end, you are going through some common middleware decisions. It's actually a good question. There's been kind of a lot of other modular stuff that's being built out across the ecosystem. How closely do you align with like the various other teams on?
We're actually close to the ARC team. The lead developer is in the same office as I am, and I am actually one of the original developers of ARC, so I know it very, very well.
Oh, yeah.
And at the moment, we don't need to do this because like we say, we're running SV Node and Teranode at the same time, and therefore we're using the old peer-to-peer network to do all the transaction propagation and all those kind of stuff. So, and that is what ARC does now. ARC connects to the peer-to-peer network and sends out transactions. And so you can actually just do that with Teranode now. So we have some time there as well for ARC to be changed to talk natively to Teranode.
Sure.
That doesn't really need to happen until all the SV nodes are sunset, because that's the time when we have to sunset the peer-to-peer network. And we're I don't want to say hopeful, but I think maybe hopeful that IPv6 will come along and help us, because we're doing some. Jake Jones has been doing some tests on overlay networks using IPv6, and it's looking good. And they've actually gotten it working with multicast. And so hopefully we can start taking some of those learnings and introducing them into Teranode next year, and then we'll have an IPv6 multicast interface to get transactions into Teranode, and that will make it easier for everybody, including ARC, to get transactions in there. Yeah,
really cool. Let's take another one, Mr. Vidal. Apparently we don't have a ton of questions. So if you're out here watching and you've got a million questions about Teranode, now is your opportunity. Are there other database solutions planned other than Aerospike? I think I kind of hit on this earlier, but
we do actually have Postgres and SQLite also built in as UTXO stores, so you can actually use them today, but they don't scale as well as Aerospike does. But we use a lot of that in testing. It's also just to be able to see what the data is. So go into the Postgres database and see everything.
Sure. Asking about Aerospike because it's is not self-hosted as far as I know. It is cloud-based. Is that the case?
No, it's actually, you do have a cloud-based version from Aerospike, which I think is great. They have a good offering there, but we actually do run it on our own hardware, or our AWS hardware, but in our own, we have our own control. And they even have a community edition. So you can actually download and use the community edition to a certain extent, to a certain amount of data, I think.
Nice.
So they have all the offerings.
Cool.
And they're really cool.
Great. Siggi. There we go.
Nelson, nice to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time.
When a trillion a day. That's
it's not up to us, is it? It's up to those guys. Build applications and do something. Put some usage on there.
Yep. No, that is, and maybe that's not in your purview as the engineer architect of this thing, but how do we attract more customers? This has been my mission. What I tell everybody is everybody wants to bicker about protocol stuff. And it's like, there's probably a dozen people on earth that need to be talking about the protocol. Everybody else should be talking about getting customers and that kind of thing. But I'd love to hear your opinion. Like how can we get more customers on this kind of stuff? You actually are an app developer, have some experience in this too. What are your thoughts on that?
I think so. How do I put this? There's a lot of misunderstanding about what blockchain is, just to start with. Let alone what we are doing, and scaling this thing up to levels that we are doing. So there's a massive education effort that's needed in business. I think 99.9% of the people out there have no idea. They think this, blockchain is CryptoKitties and NFTs and exchanges and crazy stuff. But you can actually use it for a lot of boring stuff in businesses to audit data and timestamping. It's a timestamping digital notary service. And there's lots of boring stuff that has huge volumes. But those people are very skeptical of what we do because they've, the crypto, it's crypto. It's not blockchain, it's crypto. So we need to get away from that and start not talking about, what this technology can actually do outside of just trading, CryptoKitties or coins or whatever stupid thing you want to do. And get it into accounting systems, into supply chain management, into financial services. We can make things so much cheaper. A transaction is basically an ownership transfer, and it costs a tenth. What is it, 1/10 no, 1,000th of a cent or something like that, 10,000th of a cent.
Yeah,
it's almost free.
It's between a 5 and a 10,000th of a cent. Last I checked.
There you go.
It's been a while though. Yeah.
And that's an ownership transfer, and that could be an ownership transfer of anything, of a bill of lading, or a house, or a car, or a piece of a house, or or a financial transaction. There's nothing that is that cheap and safe and secure. And I had an interesting discussion today with somebody, and he said that the enterprises and businesses, they don't trust it. They look at, I have this transaction, but how do I know it's going to get mined? There are all these rats running around doing something. As look at the crypto industry, and so there's massive work there in educating business in what this actually. We're not crypto. We're a I hate to say it, but enterprise. No, we're just a blockchain where you can do enterprise things on. You can also do CryptoKitties. You can also do all this other stuff for NFTs. And the one set of ordinals is doing a lot of fun stuff. It's a lot of really great things. That's all okay. That's all good. But this education about it being a utility. It's like water, electricity, or the internet is a utility, and that's how you should look at it and use it to make your business processes more efficient, cheaper, and safer. Make things auditable. I mean, that's an uphill battle, to be honest, because of the last 15 years.
I tweeted about this a week or two ago and basically said, I've spent almost all of the last 7 or 8 years trying to right the wrongs of blockchain economy, and it's only gotten worse. Like as I've been like proactively writing and podcasting and doing debates and doing appearances and some days 8 hours tweeting back and forth with people where I'm like, this was a productive thread. Like we had some breakthrough. Anybody who would read this would clearly see that I'm right, and it's like, nope, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse and worse pretty consistently.
But I mean, maybe we have to be bold and do big things and think about how we can disrupt big industries and make things a lot cheaper. I mean, regulation is something that's always difficult because it makes everything more expensive. So in the financial industry, maybe the hardest one to tackle, but other things, So.
All right, let's do some lightning round questions. If Google decided they wanted to use BSV tomorrow, would Teranode be ready, or will it be ready? If not, what is the timeline on something that massive? I mean, that's
2026.
Well, it's hard. I mean, you get a company like Google who's like, I mean, you get an open check. If you need $1 billion to get it done in 2 months, Siggi, get it done. Like, is that something like, could you throw more money at it and launch quicker, or are we just is what it is?
I'm sure that if we get really seasoned senior engineers that know what they're doing, they could help make it go a little bit faster. But actually, what one of the difficult thing about this is that you also have to know blockchain. You have to know Bitcoin, and there's very few people that actually know that. So that makes it hard. And there's this thing in the Mythical Man Month by Mr. Brooks that adding more people to a software project that is just going to make it more late.
Yep.
So I'm not sure if throwing $1 billion at it would help. It would probably help a little bit, but
just hire 3 more guys and give them $300 million each.
Yeah, and then it will be 3 months later.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, next question. We're going to try to bang through. We got a bunch of these. Seems like a major investment to have no customer demand at all for blockchain. Are you as confident in the future of high volume blockchain as the person making this investment?
I do share his views. Yes, I do. I do share his views. And I think, well, there's 2 ways of looking at it. Either this technology is going to be used, it's going to make the world a more fair and balanced place and nice, and there's it's a truth machine, time stamping server that can use for everything, so it's going to make the world a better place. Yeah. And if it's not going to be used, the world is not going to be a nice place. That's what I think, because we have AI coming out. AI is doing amazing things, and who is going to check what AI is doing? Who's going to be the the arbiter of truth and things like that? If we don't have something like a blockchain where we can actually timestamp things and prove things. Yeah. Were the way they were in the past, we're relying on all these intermediaries, and I don't know how much trust you would put into bankers and lawyers and all these kind of people, but they're all people, and this math works. So I think it's we have to make it work.
Yeah.
For the children.
I always say either this is the biggest and most important idea, and ultimately if we fail, like if BSV fails, everyone else is going to fail eventually too. We're just getting there quicker. Like at what point do we burn out on approach to the sun? Like we're just first. We're leading. So yeah, if we fail, it's just we're the canary in the coal mine for everybody else. So yeah.
But I would like to say and put it on record that I'm incredibly grateful for the investments that are made into this community by our investor, and that the vision and the steadfastness to do that. I think it's amazing, and to be able, I'm very grateful to be a part of that. I'd say.
Yep. No, same. It's a really good point. What's the most unexpected lesson you've learned working on this?
So when we went into this project, we've been talking to each other for a long time in the team about, we're missing something. This isn't that hard. You should be able to do this. We even had some talks, Kurt, as well. I think 2 or 2.5 years ago about skills. And actually, what surprises the most is how, when you get to this scale, how important the infrastructure actually is. Because normally when you're scaling a website, you're doing something, you're not really getting to the limits of network cards and things like that. You have other limits, and you can figure that out. But at 1 million transactions a second, we were actually hammering the AWS infrastructure in such a way that things just broke down. And that was partly, our fault, the way we were doing it, and partly also AWS doesn't publish all the limitations they have on their networking, for instance. So we had to architect around that. But when we started out, we did not think that was a problem. Put a 100 gigabit network card in a machine and another machine, and everything should work. Well, it's not that easy. So the infrastructure stuff has actually been most surprising to me.
Interesting. Listen. Cool. Let's take another question. We're also going to have to choose the question or comment of the day. We're going to have to bang out a meme of the week at some point in the next 8 minutes here. Jordan Kramsky, our AWS friend, what is your take on the restoration of the difficulty adjustment algorithm? Where do you see this surfacing once Chronicle is in place and the Mandela gets up and operating? Blockers, considerations before the change back? That's a big question.
I'm thinking, should I be diplomatic now or not? But I'm going to be a little bit blunt. I don't
burn it down, Siggy.
I don't really care that much. No, I mean it's an important thing, and Connor is working on this, so I'm very happy to defer all the responsibility for this to him in the stewardship thing. But I think the difficulty, I understand there's a lot of contention about that as well. But putting in the original difficulty algorithm now would be dangerous. I mean, that would be putting the network at risk. So I don't think that's a good thing. So it will be done at a later time when we have a little bit more hash power, a little bit more volume. Maybe price goes up. We can do those things because it'll be safer to do. But it's kind of interesting though, because these kind of details to me are like black boxes. There is a difficulty algorithm, left or right. There's lots of pros and cons, but when you're implementing the system, you don't really care. I mean, whether that is going with a difficulty algorithm calculating 8 minutes or 10 minutes or 12 minutes, or the difficulty, that's not as important to me. So I like deferring those things to Connor, and he can think about that harder. And I'll think hard about the interactions of the microservices and the networking and the concurrency and things like that.
Whatever the consideration, I'd be very open to a stopgap change that makes us not victims of hash power arbitrage. Like I understand why it's there and all of that, and there are lots of good reasons to have it for security. But the one thing that always bugs me is that like we only get mercenary hashers that come over. They come over until the profitability goes back down, which then drives our price back down, and then. So it's part of the reason we get held down too. And it's similar with Bitcoin Cash. They're the same thing. People will park a little bit of hash power there if their price spikes higher than everybody else's, and then it's like, oh, okay, we'll gobble that up. But then within, 12 hours or whatever, the arbitrage gap is closed, and then the hash power leaves. And it's just like, I don't know. It's like having a really abusive on again, off again boyfriend or something. Hey, honey, I'm in town this week. So not not fun. Another question: when both SV Node and Teranode are working simultaneously, how does SV Node process large blocks? For example, a 100 gig block. What does that look like?
Probably
You just
not.
have to download it, right?
I
That's a
don't
lot
know
of.
I don't know if that will work. The way that SV Node works now, I think it has to put everything into memory, and you need a very, very big server to be able to do this. So the way that Teranode actually does it, it doesn't, when a block is found, it doesn't send 100 gigabytes to other Teranodes. It's already been sharing data during that 10-minute period. And so when the block comes in, it's like a 32 kilobyte packet that is sent to the other nodes, and they validate everything, and then that block is done. And the SV Node doesn't do that. So it might be not possible.
Who's actually working on SV Node? Last I checked, it was Dan Connolly, I think, was like lead dev over at SV Node. Is that
no? No, I should know their names, and I apologize for. I think I don't want to call them out either if they don't want to be on the.
Yeah, they may not want to be doxxed. Yeah.
There's a couple of people on our side in the BSV Association, that are leading that from a project management perspective, and there's a couple of developers at nChain that are doing a really great job of developing that now and keeping that fresh.
Cool. All right. I think we need to do our meme of the week here. I'm gonna ask you your hot dog question. So I'm gonna ask early, what's the right way to dress a hot dog? And then you can think of it, unless you don't need to think about it. If you're ready,
I don't have to think about that.
All right, what is it, man? How do you make a perfect hot dog?
You want to know how? I'm from Iceland, right? So Iceland inherited a lot of their food from the Americans after the Second World War, and one of it is a hot dog. So an Icelandic hot dog, you get your bun. You put some tomato ketchup and fried onions, and then you put your hot dog, and maybe raw onions as well. I like that. You can get that fried onions and raw onions. That's nice. And a hot dog, and then you put Icelandic mustard and something called remoulade sauce, which is like a yellowish sauce. It's like I don't know what that would be in American, but that's.
Is it sweet?
It's kind of sweet. Yeah, the mustard is also sweet. It's not spicy mustard. It's sweet mustard, and then some remoulade sauce on it as well. And that's an Icelandic hot dog. It's the best way to eat it.
Fascinating. All right, that sounds great. I'd love to try
it. Every time, it's pathological. Every time we go back to Iceland, we have to have some hot dogs. The first gas station that we find from the airport, stop, buy a hot dog, buy another one. And another one, and then you're sick the rest of the day, but it was totally worth it.
Sure. No, we do the same thing. When I go back to Chicago, we immediately go to Portillo's, and we will get Chicago-style hot dog, and we will get an Italian beef sandwich, which is a Chicago-style Italian beef is the single best sandwich ever invented. And for everybody that doesn't know what that is, look it up. It is, it's heaven. That's the best sandwich ever. So. But I'm the same way. I'm land in Chicago, all right, we're going to Portillo's or Mr. Beef or something, and
first stop.
And then I'm sick. Yeah, I'm I need to sleep this one off. Say my prayers.
No, then I go to my cabin in the nature, and with my couple of kilos of Icelandic candy, and pass out after some sugar high.
Perfect. That sounds awesome.
It's not good. It's very bad. I'm getting older. I should stop doing that. But
you know what? I think you're full-time keto carnivore guy. I think every once in a while you've earned a candy binge.
I can't. Well, yes, I am now. I started yesterday again.
All right, there we go.
I have a good friend who is actually listening in, and he I don't know if I got him on keto or he got me on keto, but he's very carnivore at the moment, and he's like, see, what the hell are you doing? You know what's good for you, and you're not doing it. So, hi, I'm back on keto since yesterday, so don't worry.
Awesome. Really cool. All right, it's 3:00, so we got to do our meme of the week. As that's happening, I'm going to have a little powwow with Mr. Vidal. I'll bring you back for about 2 minutes for closing thoughts, and then we'll be done. So, meme of the week.
And now it's time for the meme of the week.
Subject notes. the extraction theory papers? Am I the only one who did the reading?
He'd have to heat the cube to 120 million Kelvin just to break through the Coulomb barrier.
Unless Selbig has figured out how to stabilize the quantum tunneling effect.
Well, if he could do that, he could achieve heavy ion fusion at any reactor on the planet.
Finally, someone who speaks English.
Is that what just happened?
Love it. All right. Comment of the day. Let's bang that out. All right, Mr. Jose Hidalgo, please reach out to the official CoinGeek account on X. You can hand him your hand cash handle and receive a full deck of Champions TCG cards, courtesy of the Champions TCG team. Congratulations, Mr. Hidalgo. Siggi, take 2 minutes, take 3 minutes, however many minutes you need. What are your closing thoughts? What would you like to say to the smartest, probably 3 or 4 dozen people in the world who are watching right now? Floor is yours.
That's so you have to get me started on a rant, and I can go for 30 minutes if I really get started right now.
Why is everybody else wrong about blockchain, Siggi?
Why is everybody else wrong about blockchain? Because they're idiots. No, there's important. We are doing important work on the base layer, and there's some very smart people working on that, and we're working very hard. Almost we need vacation every couple of weeks because we're working so hard. But that is only the base layer, and there are so many layers on top of that. And what we really need to do is people think about how to build applications. There's also, I want to shout out to the utilization stream, also at the BSVA, that have been working also with you guys at Gorilla Pool, right? With putting in new libraries in there, building overlay nodes, try to prepare the network for scale, because just Teranode is not enough. Teranode is going to be the heart of the network, doing all the timestamping and transaction validation. But if we're really going to scale to millions of transactions a second, we need a lot more. And those guys are working on that every day, which is great with a lot of people, really good people. But on top of that, we just need the applications. We need people to start businesses and be brave. I think a lot of the things that we've done so far are great, but not big enough. Maybe we have to think much bigger what we do. And this technology has so much potential, so huge potential to do things in finance and in every area to make the world a little bit a better place, more fair, more honest, and I also like to say, don't be afraid to reach out to the people at the BSVA or any of us, because we're just people, and we're also insecure, and we're also afraid of things, and I actually don't like to be on front of the camera, but I do it because Kurt is so nice. But reach out and get us to help, and there's people are very, very busy trying to do the things, but everybody is rooting for everybody in this ecosystem, and especially us at the BSVA. We're there to help people succeed. We're not there to be successful ourselves. Right. We're here to help the ecosystem be successful by building all these base things to make it easier for them to build applications. So be brave, reach out, talk to us, and don't be afraid. We're just people like everybody else, and with everything that comes along with that. Yeah. And just to say that, I want to say that I think it was during the London Blockchain Conference, during the panel, and I think probably during our last interview that I said some stupid stuff. I was pointed out to me after the fact, like Siggi, right, you said proof of stake. Do you mean proof of work? It's like, oh, damn.
Yes. Right.
Something like that. So we all make mistakes. It's okay, yeah. And that's how we learn, and that's how we grow, and that we get better. And so be brave and join us.
Love it. Thank you, Siggi. Looking forward to talking soon. I like our occasional private chats. I hope they continue to become more frequent. And yes. Thanks again for coming on. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for having me, Kurt.
For sure. Take care. All right, everybody. So I'm going to take like 3 seconds to answer another couple of things here that I'm seeing. Half Peasy asking, like, how to get involved, how to learn more stuff. So BSVA has the BSV Academy still exists. That's something that you can take. It's a free course. You can learn the fundamentals of how Bitcoin works. But really, if you want to learn how to like develop and some of these things, we could use more developers, but ultimately we need entrepreneurs. We need people to come up with a business idea, get good at raising some capital, get out there and find some customers. That would be the most helpful thing. But if you want to learn to develop, like get into the documents over at like onesetordinals.com. You can look at the libraries over on bsvblockchain.org. So that includes like the Go library, TypeScript, which is very similar to JavaScript if you're like a front-end web developer. There's a lot of tooling. There's a lot of good documentation out there, but basically everybody is using the one set ordinals protocol. They're using Bitcoin schema, or you have the option to use the tooling at Project Babbage, who has like this huge framework of stuff. And here's how Bitcoin should work. And, in the vision of Ty, for example, but you can pick a direction and rock and roll. So basically, read about it, figure out what you like most. But I'm a big fan personally of like anything related to one set ordinals and Bitcoin schema. And so Siggi, as far as I'm aware, so because he actually was involved in creating some of the Bitcoin schema stuff. But yeah, so a lot of opportunity, but really we need people to come up with big ideas and sell them to people. One of the best pieces of advice I was ever given, one of my first jobs, was sell something to wealthy people. So you have to do a lot of work to make decent money selling cheap things. It's about volume if you're selling something that's inexpensive. But if you have a really good idea, if you have a really smart idea, try to sell it to rich people. Try to sell it for a premium. Bring in more capital that way. So that's my advice there. How likely is it that there are enterprises with big data requirements quietly preparing for Teranode to be ready? It's very likely. I can think of a few that they've been kind of red pilled on the Bitcoin at scale sort of premise. These are the people that get invited to like the London Blockchain Conference and some of the old CoinGeek conferences and stuff. You bring in people and you talk to people that run big shipping companies and stuff, and they're like, yeah, we're super interested in blockchain. And then we talk about the limitations. They're like, oh, I need more scale than that. And so, you keep those people in the proverbial Rolodex, and you follow up with them every once in a while. You let them know, hey, Teranode's coming. Well, like, we'd love to have a pilot program with you when this kind of stuff is rolled out. So there's a good amount of people. And yeah, I think we'll see a good amount of adoption just on those people that have been warmed up for a number of years here. So, but yeah, we gotta do the work. Got to get out there and do the work. So I am 8 minutes over, which is probably too much. So I'm gonna wrap up. Reminder, everybody, every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do roughly an hour of Bitcoin related content with your questions and all of that. If you'd like to be a sponsor or a guest, please reach out to the Real CoinGeek account on X. We'll get you set up over there. And just remember to be good to each other. If we're good to each other, we all get to live in a place where everyone's good. And wouldn't that be nice? It would be certainly be nice for a change. So everybody, have a good week. Go take care of each other. Be good to each other. Send prayers, send loves, check up on your loved ones. And that's it. I'm going to wrap up. So see you next week. Goodbye.